To the authorities of the United Nations, to the representatives of the various member countries, and to all the citizens of the world watching, good afternoon. For those who don't know, I am not a politician. I am an economist, a liberal, libertarian economist, who never had the ambition to enter politics and who was honored with the position of President of the Argentine Republic. In the face of the resounding failure of more than a century of collectivist policies that destroyed our country, this is my first speech before the United Nations General Assembly, and I would like to take this opportunity, with humility, to alert the various nations of the world about the path they have been following for decades and about the danger posed by this organization's failure to fulfill its original mission. I am not here to tell the world what to do. I come here to tell the world, on the one hand, what will happen if the United Nations continues to promote the collectivist policies it has been promoting under the mandate of the 2030 Agenda, and, on the other, what values the new Argentina defends. I do want to begin by giving credit where credit is due. The United Nations organization was born from the horror of the bloodiest war in global history with the primary objective of ensuring that it would never happen again. To that end, the organization engraved its fundamental principles in stone in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There, a basic agreement was established around one maxim: that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Under the tutelage of this organization and the adoption of these ideas, for the past 70 years, humanity has experienced the longest period of global peace in history, which also coincided with the period of greatest economic growth in history. An international forum was created where nations could resolve their conflicts through cooperation, rather than resorting, instantly, to arms, and something unthinkable was achieved, permanently seating the world's 5 largest powers at the same table, each with the same veto power. Despite having completely opposing interests, all this did not make the scourge of war disappear, but it did ensure, for now, that no conflict escalated to global proportions. The result was that we went from having 2 world wars in less than 40 years, which, together, claimed more than 120 million lives, to having 70 consecutive years of relative peace and global stability, under the cloak of an order that allowed the entire world to integrate commercially, compete, and prosper. Because where trade enters, bullets do not enter, Bastiat said, because trade guarantees peace. Freedom guarantees trade, and equality before the law guarantees freedom. Ultimately, what the prophet Isaiah foretold, as can be read in the park across the street, was fulfilled. God will judge among the nations and arbitrate for the many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning shears. Nation will not take up sword against nation. They will never know war again. This is what has happened, mostly, under the aegis of the United Nations in its first decades, and therefore, from this perspective, we are talking about a remarkable success in the history of nations that cannot be ignored. However, at some point, and as is often the case with most bureaucratic structures that we humans create, this organization stopped upholding the principles outlined in its founding declaration and began to mutate. An organization that had been conceived, essentially, as a shield to protect the kingdom of man has transformed into a multi-tentacled leviathan, seeking to decide not only what each nation-state should do, but also how all the citizens of the world should live. This is how we went from an organization that pursued peace to one that imposes an ideological agenda on its members on a myriad of issues that affect human life in society. The successful United Nations model, whose origins we can trace back to the ideas of President Wilson, who spoke of a society of peace without victory, and was founded on the cooperation of nation-states, has been abandoned. It has been replaced by a model of supranational government of international bureaucrats, who seek to impose a certain way of life on the citizens of the world. What is being discussed this week here in New York at the Summit of the Future is nothing less than the deepening of the tragic course this institution has taken. Thus, the deepening of a model that, in the words of the UN Secretary General himself, requires defining a new social contract on a global scale, redoubling the commitments of the 2030 Agenda. I want to be clear about the position of the Argentine Agenda. The 2030 Agenda, although well-intentioned in its goals, is nothing more than a supranational government program of a socialist bent that seeks to solve the problems of modernity with solutions that undermine the sovereignty of nation-states and violate people's right to life, liberty, and property. It is an agenda that seeks to solve poverty, inequality, and discrimination with legislation that only deepens them. Because world history shows that the only way to guarantee prosperity is by limiting the power of the monarch, guaranteeing equality before the law, and defending individuals' right to life, liberty, and property. It has been precisely the adoption of this agenda, which obeys privileged interests, and the abandonment of the principles outlined in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that has distorted the role of this institution and set it on the wrong path. Thus, we have seen how an organization that was born to defend human rights has been one of the main proponents of the systematic violation of freedom, such as, for example, the global quarantines of 2020, which should be considered a crime against humanity. In this same house that claims to defend human rights, bloody dictatorship like those of Cuba and Venezuela have been allowed into the Human Rights Council without the slightest reproach. In this same house that claims to defend women's rights, countries that punish their women for showing their skin have been allowed into the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. In this same house, the State of Israel, the only country in the Middle East that defends liberal democracy, has been systematically voted against, while simultaneously demonstrating a total inability to respond to the scourge of terrorism. On the economic front, collectivist policies that undermine economic growth have been promoted. They violate property rights and hinder the natural economic process, even preventing the world's most disadvantaged countries from freely enjoying their own resources to move forward. These regulations and prohibitions are driven precisely by developed countries, thanks to the very things they condemn today. Furthermore, a toxic relationship has been fostered between global governance policies and international credit institutions, requiring the most marginalized countries to commit resources they don't have to programs they don't need, turning them into perpetual debtors to further the agenda of the global elites. The tutelage of the World Economic Forum, where ridiculous policies are promoted with Malthusian blinders, such as zero emissions policies that harm, above all, poor countries, hasn't helped matters. Policies related to sexual and reproductive rights have not been helped, when the birth rate in Western countries is plummeting, heralding a bleak future for all. Nor has the organization satisfactorily fulfilled its mission of defending the territorial sovereignty of its members, as we Argentines know firsthand, in its relationship with the Falkland Islands. And we have even reached a situation in which the Security Council, which is the most important body in this House, has been distorted, because the veto of its permanent members has begun to be used to defend the particular interests of some. This is where we are today, with an organization powerless to provide solutions to truly global conflicts, such as the abhorrent Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has already cost the lives of more than 300,000 people and left more than 1 million injured in the process. An organization that, instead of confronting these conflicts, invests time and effort in imposing on poor countries what, how, and how they should produce, with whom they should liaise, what they should eat, and what they should believe. As the current Pact for the Future seeks to dictate, this long list of errors and contradictions has not been without cause. but has resulted in the loss of credibility of the United Nations among the citizens of the free world and in the distortion of its functions. Therefore, I want to issue a warning. We are facing the end of a cycle. The collectivism and moral posturing of the woke agenda have collided with reality and no longer have credible solutions to offer to the world's real problems. In fact, they never had any. If the 2030 agenda failed, as its own promoters acknowledge, the answer should be to ask ourselves whether it wasn't a poorly conceived program from the start. Accept that reality and change course. We cannot pretend to persist in error by doubling down on an agenda that has failed. The same thing always happens with ideas that come from the left. They design a model according to what human beings should be, according to them, and when individuals, freely, act differently, they have no better solution than to restrict, repress, and curtail their freedom. We, in Argentina, have already seen with our own eyes what lies at the end of this path of envy and sad passions, poverty, brutalization, anarchy, and a fatal absence of freedom. We still have time to stray from this path. I want to be clear about something so there are no misunderstandings. Argentina, which is currently undergoing a profound process of change, has decided to embrace the ideas of freedom. Those ideas that say that all citizens are born free and equal before the law, that we have inalienable rights granted by the Creator, among which are the right to life, liberty, and property. These principles, which govern the process of change we are carrying out in Argentina, are also the principles that will guide our international conduct from now on. We believe in the defense of life for all. We believe in the defense of property for all. We believe in freedom of expression for all. We believe in freedom of worship for all. We believe in freedom of trade for all. And we believe in limited government, all of them. And since in these times what happens in one country quickly impacts others, we believe that all peoples must live free from tyranny and oppression, whether it takes the form of political oppression, economic slavery, or religious fanaticism. This fundamental idea must not remain mere words. It must be supported in deeds, diplomatically, economically, and materially, through the joint strength of all countries that defend freedom. This doctrine of the new Argentina is nothing more and nothing less than the true essence of the United Nations, that is, the cooperation of the United Nations in defense of freedom. If the United Nations decides to return to the principles that gave it life and adapt to the role for which it was conceived, count on Argentina's unwavering support in the fight for freedom. Also, know that Argentina will not support any policy that involves restricting individual liberties, trade, or violating the natural rights of individuals, no matter who promotes it or how much consensus there is in that institution. For this reason, we wish to officially express our dissent on the Pact of the Future, signed on Sunday, and we invite all the nations of the free world to join us, not only in dissenting from this pact, but also in creating a new agenda for this noble institution, the agenda of freedom. From this day forward, know that the Argentine Republic will abandon the position of historical neutrality that characterized us and will be at the forefront of the fight in defense of freedom. Because, as Thomas Paine said, those who wish to reap the blessings of liberty must, like men, endure the fatigue of defending it. May God bless the Argentines and all the citizens of the world. And may the forces of heaven be with us. Long live liberty, damn it. Thank you very much.